go. Okay. So I want to make sure in case I miss anything, you feel free to put stuff in chat. But again, with a small group, we may not need to use the chat. So David Jang will be joining us shortly, but he's busy getting people into the different breakout groups. I'd like to encourage everyone to stay fairly positive and think about possibilities as opposed to what cannot be done. And just, we'll certainly get into realistic reviews of everything as we go through and evaluate. So let's start with the value statement that we have. And we'll get down to all the goals in a second, but let's just like to take a minute and get your reactions to this value statement. Carlisle values natural resource conservation, resilience to climate change, and reduction of the community's impact on the natural environment. Does this resonate with you? Does this reflect Carlisle's values? What are your thoughts?
Bob, a question about resilience to climate change. By resilience to climate change, are you talking about adaptation, just being able to withstand climate change impacts, or and recover? And what would that, what is it exactly that's meant by that?
That's exactly what it means. The primary focus is on protecting humans and also protecting property and infrastructure from damage due to more severe weather primarily that we anticipate we're not going to be able to avoid.
But I think there still should be something explicit in the statement about doing what we can to reduce our contribution to climate change, as well as learning how to adapt to it.
That's a good point. That's certainly intended to be in there, but
it's not explicit
enough from just say reducing their impact.
How would you change that last phrase, and reduction of the community's impact on the natural environment?
Well, we don't necessarily need to wordsmith it here. Let's get the basic ideas and
sure.
offline we can play with it. But I think that's a great suggestion, Don. Thank you. Any other thoughts on the value statement?
I don't know if it belongs in the value statement per se, but I think personal accountability. I think a lot of people think, oh yes, the town is very green-minded and leaves it at that. And I think personal accountability of one's own impact as opposed to leaving it broader as a town. I don't know.
Okay.
I think that's a very good point. I actually wrote a paper 20 years ago that's still available on a website somewhere in the bowels of MIT, in the combined computer science and AI labs. And the paper is about environmental citizenship, and it addresses exactly what Christine is talking about. And that is, what can we do as individuals? Obviously we can't solve the problem individually, but we can do more than we think. And that's what this paper talks about. I'd also like to make one other suggestion. I'm an electric car early adopter. We have a BMW i3. It's a 2014. We've had it for 6 years and got it in early 2015. I think it'd be a good idea to encourage people like me to make themselves available and make the technology available to other people who may be thinking about this. And I'd be happy to take people for rides, explain what it's like to live with an electric car, how it changes your relationship to the car in good ways and bad, and just use us use us as as information resources for other people in the town who are moving in our direction or thinking about it.
Yeah, that's a great thought, and we can expand that to all kinds of technologies.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, one
I'm
thing
just
I-
using the electric car as an example,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
you're absolutely right.
absolutely.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah,
So
I love the idea of neighbor-to-neighbor assistance.
technology ambassadors.
Exactly.
I love
A
it.
great idea. John, I'd also love to see your paper.
Yeah, please, please
Great.
send us the link, or send me the link at least, and we can get it around.
I can do that. I've got to dig it out. But
Okay,
it
Oh, it doesn't have to be tonight.
okay. I'll make a note to send it to you, Bob.
Okay. Okay, those are some really good comments. We may not be able to explicitly get everything into the value statement, but don't worry, we've got plenty of goals where we can pick up where we miss. This is really to capture the top level. So let's move on and start with the goals. And what I'd like to do, there's 5 goals you saw, briefly summarized. What I'd like to do is go through each one individually, just quickly, and just get a kind of a head nod from you folks as to whether this, is good, bad, or indifferent. And then when we get all 5 up, we can go and have a more detailed discussion. And so basically what I'm asking, do you agree, do you disagree, or are you somewhere in the middle on this one? So
Do we
Strongly
have-
agree. Sorry.
Right?
Bob, do we have an environmental sustainability policy?
Well, that's a really good point. I think this is a little,
I would say to create and then maintain a town environmental sustainability policy.
Or implement,
Well, you can't implement something until you create it
no, to create and implement.
and implement, yes.
no, it's a good point. The only reason we'd say strengthen is even though we haven't done that much, we did become a green community in 2009, and we have made some commitments and adopted the stretch code and for buildings and all that. So, but that's not a big step. So I think it's a valid comment.
Well, it could also
I-
be expand and implement. I mean, because we have done things, and I don't think we should lose sight of that. We just need to build on that, right? But
Yes.
either way,
It sounds like there's general agreement. This is good to go.
Yeah, I strongly support all of this, all of what was said.
yes. So
Ditto.
that's,
Establish and pursue community-wide carbon reduction goals aligned with state goals. You might argue these first 2 are related, but they're a little different in emphasis.
Bob, you're,
My one concern about that is that it sort of reads like whatever the state does, that's what we're going to do. And in some cases, we may want to go beyond what the state is doing.
Mhm.
Got it.
And in other cases,
Just
what
as
state policies
as
may not work for
California,
this
as
town.
California's emissions, automobile emissions requirements are more stringent than the rest of the country.
Yes. Good point. Okay, let me roll up the next one here. Reduce residential, commercial, and municipal. We can just as well say community-wide consumption of energy, water, and non-recyclable materials.
Yes, yes, yes.
There's a pattern here. Maybe I should just pull these all up. We'll get them on the table. The next one is protect water resources and wetlands.
Absolutely.
Of course.
Safeguard the community from the impacts of climate change. This is the resiliency piece we're talking about. I might add there are some goals under some of the other values that certainly overlap here. We have, for example, under Carlisle character, there's a goal about protecting and maintaining their open spaces. Under connectivity, there's a goal about making the town more walkable. So we haven't ignored those. We just decided to put those goals in one place instead of under every value. Well, now we have the list up there. Let's open up we've already done this quite a bit already. You folks are way ahead of me here, but let's open it up to further discussion. Is there anything we're missing that we should add? Is there any
Something,
yeah,
something I'd like to suggest, Bob, is, you know, there's a tendency to view, certainly not by everyone, and Carlisle's a smart community, and so, you know, I'm not sure how prevalent this is here, but there's a tendency to view recycling as something of a panacea, and allows people to continue, you know, the culture of convenience, use it once, throw it away. You know, this cultural change that's happened in my lifetime. I mean, I grew up with a grandmother who saved string, and, you know, who wasted nothing. And, you know, now we just don't think about it. We use it and throw it away. I think something that needs to be, you know, said explicitly is that, you know, there's a hierarchy of no use or reuse and recycling, and certainly reuse is better than recycling, and recycling has its costs, and people need to know that. I don't know whether Carlisle needs to be told that, but certainly there are people who do need to be told that. So I'd at least like to suggest that this be considered for something that's discussed explicitly.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And we'll definitely get that theme in here at some level. I agree 100%. And
can I,
not use in the first place is even better than reuse. So
Yeah.
Yep.
so this is Lana. I'm a member of the recycling committee, and I couldn't agree more with you, Don. It has led us to feeling that we've done everything we can do, and we're sort of satisfied. And if we're, no matter how rigorous we are, I was looking at the word non-recyclable materials, you know, reducing non-recyclable materials, and I don't know if we have to be that explicit in this, but I think first of all, we do need to focus on not creating the waste in the first place. So upstream,
Yep.
And that's the reduce issue to a large extent. But with non-recyclable, I mean, there's also food waste. So it's dealing with organic. First of all, we want to reduce the amount of food waste. But if we do have organics, that they're diverted into, you know, compost. So just to make sure that that's clear. But I think the point is so critical that it's not about recycling, it's about reducing the waste at the front of the line.
That's a really good point. Well, and you know, in hindsight, we probably could have caught that ahead of time, but thanks for bringing it up. We struggled a bit and went back and forth on the wording, as you might imagine. So thank you for that.
I'd like to.
Well, I just jumped in here and just wanted to like ask kind of for an update of just what's been going on. So
yeah, well, everyone, this is a great team, David. Everyone is into it full speed, and I've been taking some notes here, so no worries. We've getting some inputs on these goals. So far, everyone's in agreement, but they had added some really important embellishments. So we're in full swing here.
So I'd like to make a comment about protecting water resources and wetlands. And is there a way that we can extend that a little bit beyond just the water-based natural environment? You know, so I think
meaning to capture more of the just land-based.
Well, yeah, the terrestrial ecosystem, or at least certain parts of it, and probably, you know, just as an example, and it might be a trivial example to some, not even an issue to others, but you know, I've noticed in the past 2 years a huge increase in the amount of poison ivy growing up beside the roads. So where that's growing, we don't have other more desirable plants growing, and you know, how can we sort of control that, which you know definitely has an impact on the livability of our natural environment, but how can we control that in a way that does not, well, poison the rest of the environment?
Sure.
Yeah, that's a good point. Poison ivy, invasives in general. I know some people will debate
that's a
whether
good way
poison
to-
ivy is invasive, but that's the idea. It's an undesirable for sure. And again, we capture some of this in our Carlisle character, but it's fine to get the ideas down here too. So,
If I also may add something along the lines, so many people still use so many poisons. And, they spray for mosquitoes, they use herbicides, insecticides, and all those have such an impact way beyond their personal property. And so maybe somehow alluding to trying to reduce the use of such chemicals, finding more natural ways of taking care of some of the, some of the issues instead of jumping into use of chemicals.
Excellent. Yeah. Good point.
That's an excellent point. And I'd just like to append something to that. And that is, along the lines of what I said earlier about, community, sharing experiences with the community. My wife is an expert gardener, and we've been here now since 1995. And this place was an environmental disaster when we bought it. And the previous owners just used horrible stuff here. And we used no poisons whatsoever. And no credit goes to me other than the fact that she and I, talk a lot about environmental issues. But she has created an absolutely beautiful garden here without any use of the poisons that Christina was talking about. And we really, it's just a pleasure. We have a lot of birds. The place looks beautiful. And Joan, I'm sure, would be happy to share. She's a member of the garden club and would be happy to share, her techniques with other people. So it's another way that we can interact with each other to share our ideas.
That's a great suggestion. Yeah, another, I don't know if we call it a technology ambassador or not, but something along those lines, right?
It'd be nice to address or mention noise pollution. And
Yes.
Selfishly, it's annoying as hell to listen to leaf blowers and lawn equipment, but also bad for the environment and disrupts natural patterns of wildlife.
Great point.
That's a really good point.
Great point.
We easy to forget about until we're bothered by it. Yeah.
I'll mention something that's a little more in sort of like a general approach, in that we have such amazing resources here, and so many residents, I feel, view these resources as, what can they do for me? And how can we utilize them for our benefit? And I think it's important to start considering what can we do for these resources and how can we protect them. And it's not all about what can they do for us, how can we use them? It's how can we protect them? How can we serve these natural resources? So I think, and I don't know how to go about it, but a slight modification in how people view our wonderful natural resources that we have. And if it's just, I don't know, like community outreach, I have no idea. But
So that's okay. The idea is an excellent one. And
Well, it's
there's another issue that I see all the time, and that is people doing things that are environmentally damaging and make no sense whatsoever on a cost-benefit basis. And it's just because I don't think they're bad people. I think it's just that they're not thinking about it. Such as leaving the engine running. I mean, the post office has a no idle zone. Wonderful. Okay, but people, or just going into a Starbucks every day and getting coffee with a plastic cover or or 2 cups or whatever. Bring a mug with you, and that sort of thing. And I think if we can do something to raise people's environmental awareness without condescending to them or talking down to them, which is not going to work, I think it would be all to the good.
yeah, that's a great suggestion. It's an education and behavioral change thing, but it doesn't necessarily, you're implying it doesn't necessarily mean, well, I'm going all the way to a vegan diet, I'm going to give up my automobile and walk, but it's just, doing some, more modest modifications. It just don't add any value.
And a lot of times making modifications doesn't mean a more Spartan lifestyle, as you're saying, and it also it will also save you money. A lot of times, doing the right thing environmentally will also save you money.
I think too, sometimes people, it's sort of force of habit, right?
Mhm.
I remember, I started using reusable grocery bags years ago. And all it took was for getting them in the car one day when it was raining. And I ran out, got wet in the rain, and took the bags, and I never forgot again. But also I found all kinds of great alternatives. There are reusable produce bags, and you can wash them with no trouble. I've got some that have lasted for years. There are all kinds of things that they're available if you look for them. But I think in people's busy lives, we go with what's most convenient. And I think it would be great to be able, as part of our plan, as an implementation plan, to make sure we let people know what options are available. And Christina, I think what you were saying about, we don't own the earth, we borrow it from the next generation. And I just think we have to remember that isn't original. I wish it was with me, but it's that kind of an attitude.
So how are we doing on time, David?
Got 2 minutes left.
Okay, so we'll have
I
to
would just
wrap
like
up pretty
to,
quickly.
if I can
Go ahead.
jump in and just
Yeah.
pose a question, but
Sure.
I'm just curious if there's a sentiment among Carlisle residents that they take the environment as well as, I'm just thinking like conservation land for granted. That you're thinking as it more of like a feature of living here rather than something to like steward. And is there a sentiment that there's too much conservation land that's being preserved and not enough to be developed and contribute to the town's tax base? So I want to hear some thoughts if you have any about that. Are we saving too much land for conservation?
I
Absolutely
think
not.
some people
Absolutely not.
think that, but I think the more time passes and the more conservation land that we have, the more value our town will have. And I think fiscally, our property values will increase as other towns get denser and denser and denser. Fiscally, our property values will increase. Our quality of life will increase. So I think that we should try and preserve as much as possible, even more.
But at the expense of people moving in, what takes precedence? I'm just playing devil's advocate. I'm just.
Well, it's
Um,
No, I understand.
establish what kind of upper limit there would be and what that might look like, right?
But I also think that instead of talking about sort of pillaging the conservation land,
Yeah.
what about how we currently use zoning? And the 2-acre minimum lot, for example, are there ways that we could, again, push forward with things like accessory apartments, with duplexes on 2 acres of land, smaller each section would, is that something that we could work to? Because we also have the goal of trying to increase.
Of whether, how do we know when everybody that wants to join has joined?
Well, we may not. Hi, Jerry. we may just need to get started shortly, but I'll be facilitating today, and I'm also going to just put up a screen share here to get us started. Bear with me 1 second. Okay, what are you seeing? It doesn't, I'm sure this is, what are you getting on your screen? Anything?
Yeah.
So you have an environmental stewardship slide with some photos there.
Yes.
Great, thank you. I usually get a little more of a frame around it than that. So welcome everybody. Alan and Jerry and Donna. And Don, are you joining us again?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. So environmental stewardship, what we're going to do here is we're going to go through the value statement, take a quick look at that and see what people think of it. We'll go through each of the goals, get a quick reaction to it, and then look at our list of goals and see what folks think and see what embellishments we might make. We are recording this session. I hope you don't mind. That helps us with the note taking. And we're a small group, so we'll just do things verbally. No need to use the chat here, just make it easier to capture everything. I'll be taking notes, and when Alexis joins, she may also take notes. So we'll have a couple opportunities to make sure we're capturing everything that's said here today. So let's jump right into it. Environmental stewardship. The way we've crafted our draft vision statement here, value statement, I should say, is Carlisle values natural resource conservation, resilience to climate change, and reduction of the community's impact on the natural environment. And so my question to you is, does that resonate with you? Does that ring true for Carlisle?
It rings true for me.
Yep, me too.
Okay.
Same here.
All right, excellent. So let's get into each of the goals. I'm going to put these up one at a time to get just a quick reaction. And then once we have all five up, we can get into a more detailed discussion about whether we should take some away or add some new, or even come up with some action steps we might pursue to tackle each of these. But first, as we just put those up one at a time, just as kind of a group reaction, agree, disagree, or neutral. Strengthen town's environmental sustainability policies.
I think I agree, but I'm not sure exactly what it means.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. What do we mean by policies? My view here is that policies are not limited to, but include ordinances, zoning things, bylaws, and they can be looser practices, but there's generally some kind of an incentive or even requirement in some cases to do something, as opposed to something that's completely voluntary. So it doesn't mean that it's draconian in any way, but it just means that it might be something, like a pay as you throw at the transfer station, because you want to throw something out, you have to. Adoption of a stretch code for buildings, new buildings.
Yeah, I mean, probably the most powerful one you could have, the one that has the greatest effect, would be in the building codes.
Yeah, as a town, we can't adopt our own building codes, but we can adopt stretch codes, for example, or
Yes.
Maybe there's some other ways we can kind of accomplish the same thing. Okay, let's keep rolling them up here. Establish and pursue community-wide carbon reduction goals aligned with state goals. The state has set a goal to reduce carbon emissions by 2050 by at least 85%, and it might go up.
And what's the operational path for doing that?
Good question. That's up to us to decide, but we would presumably adopt goals in our master plan. If we say this is, the goal we're putting.
Are we talking about municipal buildings or all residences, or
community-wide, not just municipal?
So you are now talking building code.
We're talking about more than that. When we say building code, I just hesitate to say, because there is a state adopted building code that we can't circumvent. We can adopt the stretch code version, but we can't implement our own building code. But we can do things, for example, we may be able to do things, for example, to restrict the expansion of the natural gas infrastructure if we wanted to, so that it's not available for new construction. So buildings then have to be electric, whether that's in the building code or not. That would effectively make new buildings electric that could use renewable energy. That's just an example.
Mhm.
I'd just like to reiterate, I'm largely going to stay quiet here because I've had a lot to say in the first session, and I'm just interested in what other people have to say. But I'd just like to reiterate what I said about this, and that is that we may want to go beyond the state goals. I mean, for example, I didn't realize that the state goal for 2050 was 85% reduction. I mean, if you believe Bill
That may
Gates,
change, but yeah,
if you believe Bill Gates, we need to get to zero by 2050.
right.
Gates,
And
I highly recommend Gates's book on how not to destroy ourselves with what we're doing to the climate, and it's a very, very good book, and I recommend it to everyone, despite the recent publicity about his marriage. Nothing to do with it.
But again, I mean, I think you're talking about a town where we get, we build single digit number of new places a year.
Yes.
Right. And to what degree you can mandate people who replace existing heating systems and that sort of thing is problematic. But is that what intended here?
No, this would certainly apply to existing buildings as well. The difference might be in approach, and I'm not saying we would do X or Y, and that would be up to the community. But for example, we may want to say that we're going to apply more prescriptive approaches to new construction, but for existing, we might just find ways to make it easier for people to do it who want to, or maybe we can find ways to provide incentives for people to do it. So there's a lot of different ways we might approach it.
On a town-wide basis? I mean, right now there are a lot of incentives. For instance, I replaced my gas-fired boiler with a high efficiency system. Okay, and got significant rebates to do that, but those were not provided by the town.
Yeah, and that's true. The state does provide incentive programs through the utilities and whatnot. But there may be things we could do in addition. I'm using the word incentivize broadly to distinguish from mandating something, but there may be some way we can think of a clever way to make it attractive for people to do things and make it a little easier for them to do things.
I just would also jump in and just say sometimes it's also just through community education as well. People may not be aware of what the state offers in terms of incentives, and then so just providing education to at the town. What the town can do is commit to ensuring that education about those opportunities is.
Absolutely. And also there's an important word in this statement, and that's goals. I mean, obviously the goals can't be pie in the sky. The goals have to be related to reality in some way, but we also don't want to undershoot with the goals and set them too low.
Yeah.
So, I think we need to keep in mind the relationship between, our objectives and actual implementation.
Right. Let me just keep rolling a few of these up and we can continue our commentary. I'm just going to paraphrase this slightly and say reduce community-wide consumption of energy, water, and non-recyclable materials. So it's not just about our energy use, but we're also looking at water and waste. Protect water resources and wetlands, safeguard the community from the impacts of climate change. This really gets to the resiliency aspect. We're going to have some more extreme weather. There's perhaps some things we should do to get ready for those unavoidable consequences that are going to happen.
Bill levies.
I attended a National Grid seminar a couple of years ago that said a Category 2 hurricane is going to take down 80% of the trees in eastern Massachusetts.
Oh boy, that's exciting. I hope that's not true, but
Oh, I think it probably is true.
So any of these jump to the top as being more important than others, or they all seem pretty important?
Well, I think in terms of things we can actually do, certainly the waste one is the one is the low hanging fruit. I mean, that's
Yep.
something we can actually accomplish.
Yep.
Getting an 85% reduction in carbon emissions in this town is going to be very difficult, given the existing infrastructure and the rate of change of new infrastructure. That's very hard to do. Again, safeguarding
What would make it possible to do, Alan?
I don't know. I don't think an 85% reduction in carbon emissions in this town is possible unless we all go to electric vehicles or something, which may happen, but something certainly beyond our control.
Well, that's the question. Is it beyond our control to go to mostly
To mandate people
electric
buy
vehicles?
electric cars?
Well, maybe not to mandate, but to facilitate it, to educate, and again, make it easy to.
Well, this is a very educated town. If it were economical for people to go to electric cars and electric cars were viable for most people's uses in this town, people would do it, and many have. So I think when we talk about achievable goals, I mean, I think to set an 85% reduction, unless we really intend to do it, is ingenuous.
Okay. So the 85, the state goals are too high.
Well, they may be fine for the state, but I think we're not. It's like, 10% affordable housing in this town. We aren't going to get there in the near future.
Well, we'll see.
Yeah.
Other people-
I mean, I'm willing to hear the other arguments.
Anyone a little more optimistic about that? No, the challenges are certainly there, but we do have a lot of state policies going into place that should provide more incentives and help. We're not doing this alone. There's state and federal policy here too.
And the other, sorry, Bob.
And also taking advantage of the fact that this is a well-educated, smart town. The changes that get made don't have to be compulsory. They can be done by appealing to that, by making a strong case to people who may not, for whatever reasons, people have busy lives. They may not be thinking about this, but if there's a program that makes the case in a strong, clear way, then people may very well change their habits voluntarily. It doesn't have to be compulsory.
For me, stating it as a goal, I think is fine. But as part of that, I'd like to see a path on how we can get to that goal.
Sure.
Absolutely, yeah.
Sure.
We could get the solar panels turned on.
That'd be a nice start, wouldn't it?
So just to jump in, hi. Oh, sorry, my video's off. I think maybe it's on now. Hi, Alexis, chiming in from Barrett Planning Group. Just, to some of the things, I jumped in a little late to this conversation, but this has been interesting to listen to, especially with the concerns about things being compulsory versus not. And, just kind of reiterating Bob's point about, areas of education and doing as much as we can to incentivize, and maybe not using that in the term that it's used in terms of zoning and whatnot, but making these things more appealing and accessible to people. But the other thing to remember is that a master plan is, I wouldn't even call it a 10-year document, because it's creating a what's meant to be a lasting framework. So you're setting yourself up to, maybe it is unrealistic to have an action which we're not at that phase yet of the planning process, but when we get to, actual action recommendations that support these goals, understanding that some of them are going to be more to just get your community in a place where it might be set up to, in the years to come, get more closer to these if they matter to your community. And I know Bob had reiterated that earlier, or maybe that was in your first breakout group, Bob, but just that it's a question of, one, does the community want this? Two, if so, okay, now let's look at the things we can do, not to make it happen in the next year, next 5 years, probably even next 10 years, but to get your community on a path to getting there. So I swore I wasn't going to facilitate anything, but I wanted to jump in and say that.
That was very, very helpful, Alexis. Thank you.
Could I say something?
Absolutely. Go ahead,
Donna
Donna.
Vino here. I was just wondering, I'm not well versed in sustainability policies and so forth, but I thought, this may be a silly question, but is our conservation land considered one of our natural resources?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I mean, that's what came to my mind when I joined the group, and I just wanted to, first of all, if any of you people are on that committee, a big thank you to you. During the pandemic, the 49 or 55, I've heard different number of miles of trails have been a lifesaver for many people. And being in town for 35 years, I never experienced the trails in this way. So I wanted to thank the people on that committee, and I would love to see people, younger people, join in, and for future to continue to work on those trails. And my family, the three of us that are here, we're close to getting our Trekker award.
Oh, excellent.
So we did them all. We have a few little loops left to do, but I just wanted to thank you all for it's just been a wonderful experience, just exploring those trails, seeing the stone walls, and just beautiful.
That's great.
Yeah, excellent point. I didn't mention this earlier, but there's a couple of goals that we've listed under some of the other values, like Carlisle character value, that it gets a little bit more into our open spaces, protecting and maintaining them. But it certainly pertains here as well. Other thoughts, ideas?
So I have a question about the master plan process. So, I mean, I think these goals are laudable, and stating them in a master plan, I think is a good idea. Is it the idea that there will be concrete suggestions on how we achieve the goals as part of the master plan?
Yes. So usually the way it works in terms of getting, I think the first step is to get community consensus, which there was the whole kind of, the earlier wave of community engagement in this process, which the committee processed. And what we want to do now is bring what they think they heard to the public again and kind of test it and say, hey, did we hear what we think we heard? Are these priorities for the community? Should they be priorities for the community? Because if we hear, not necessarily speaking of these goals, but maybe in another group, or if there's something that the community says, you know what, that's actually, I don't think you heard the community correctly on that, then do we as a committee spend our energy researching best practices in comparable communities for how to make that happen? Yes or no? Because there's a lot of research that goes into coming up with recommendations, such as looking at just available funding resources, looking at programs that exist already, looking at communities that have been successful with certain strategies and asking them, hey, how'd you do that? What got in the way? But so it's almost, to preserve, I guess, to allocate time appropriately through the process. First, we just want to kind of confirm, hey, did we hear you correctly? So that's where we are. And I know, understandably, there's a long lapse of time from when that community engagement took place. So that's why we're here. And then if we feel we are on the right track with the goals, then yes, Jerry, then we say, okay, let's get a little more concrete. And then we come back to the public again, because that's, where there's going to be I think that's where there tends to be maybe a little more pushback on something that people say, yes, that is important. Oh, but I don't know if it's important enough that we would want to do that action. So that will come next.
Well, I agree with that. I think my sense is there aren't many people that would argue with these goals. I think that the path to achieving them would be contentious.
That's what I've been, that's kind of what we're gearing up for in the next phase of this, but hopefully, but I think that's where a lot of the best practices research comes in, and reassuring people, you know, hey, this community that's similar to yours, this is how they made it work. And I know it seems very, you know, unattainable, or just sometimes it's just hard to even like wrap your mind around how could we ever make that work. And to be honest, you know, the plan will come up with recommendations, we'll come up with suggestions for implementing them. And then it's ultimately on master plan implementation committee, town staff, et cetera, to do the next steps to make those things happen. And a lot of the recommendations that are going to come out of this might be relating to exploring certain possibilities more. So for example, with the goal of aligning with the state carbon reduction goals, there may need to be a whole lot more exploration that goes on that, and recommendations might kind of allude to that, suggesting, you know, the town should research this program, the town should look into this funding source. So the master plan is not going to answer it. It will answer as much as we can and steer the town in the right direction. But that's where the implementation plan comes in. So it's a long process, but we hope we hope to get there. So. Bob, I don't want to take the thunder away from you because we go back in 10 seconds. So.
Not at all, but Jerry, I'd encourage you to stay involved and suggest, you know, possible actions we can include to achieve some of these goals.
I'm not to look, honey.
So thank you, everyone. Looks like we're going to be heading back.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Cranking out these groups one more time. Thank you so much. And thank you to the facilitators. I know I've been trying to hop around, but I spent a lot of time in Bob's group the last time around, and it's been great to kind of listen in on these discussions. So hopefully the third time will be the charm, where we don't have technical issues getting into these groups. I think we had fewer people this time around that needed help, but we'll be happy to help you get into your groups this third time as well. So you have another opportunity tonight to join a group relating to a topic of interest to you. And I'll let you know when those groups are ready to launch. And then again, at the end of the meeting, we'll make sure to share in the chat again the link to the committee page, where when the survey is launched later in June, we'll make sure to get that out to you. And we'll also make sure, of course, that the information gets sent about it. So I believe there's a place on the website as well to make sure that you're signed up for the email list relating to this process. So if you don't think you are, if you didn't receive any email notifications about this, for example, maybe visit the site, make sure we have your email address so we can make sure to get the survey and any other opportunities out to you. But so it looks like the join breakout group option is launched. So take your pick for this last round. Thank you so much to the facilitators. I really appreciate it. Try to remember to hit record one more time.
Hi, Bob.
Okay, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Excellent.
Hopefully we'll get a couple more people in here.
I expect so.
But if we don't, you're the perfect person to have. And there we have Dan. Hi, Dan.
Hey, Dan. Oh, you're on mute. But...
There we go. It took me a while to get off mute. Hi, Kay. Good to see you. Kay and I have worked together a long time ago when I was a performer with a group that she had brought in to Concord as the Friends of Performing Arts in Concord.
Oh, no kidding. Well, that's great.
Oh, for the days.
Yeah. And it was just prior to my quitting my day job to actually then pursue that music career full-time for a while, and Kay made me a hat out of old neckties because it was symbolic of giving up my my day job. It was great.
Excellent, excellent.
I still have it.
Good.
So I'm going to jump right into a screen share. If you bear with me 1 second. Okay, hopefully you're seeing a slide up there.
Yeah.
Yep.
Excellent. So welcome, Philip. Looks like we have two Philips, which is two people. I only see one name though. Great. Well, good to see a good group again. My name's Bob Zog. I'm your facilitator for this breakout session. And we're going to, you know, it's been good. It's been well-balanced groups and fairly small. So we keep things pretty informal and hopefully everyone can get input and get their ideas out. So let me step right into it. We're going to take a look at our proposed value statement first, and then we'll roll down through the goals and get those up so you can provide commentary. But the real important question on the value statement is at a very top level, does this statement ring true for Carlisle? Carlisle values natural resource conservation, resilience to climate change, and reduction of the community's impact on the natural environment. Thoughts?
Well, supports some of my values. I can't speak for quote Carlisle, but
Okay.
as a little component of Carlisle, it works for me. You know, we did hear a lot in a couple of other groups I was in about ag. So agriculture, I guess, fits in here somewhere.
Certainly does. We want to, you know, make sure we pursue agriculture in a way that's as environmentally friendly as we can, you know, based on this value. Any other thoughts? Does this resonate with folks?
I don't know if Carlisle values it. It may greenwash it. Do we greenwash rather than actually? I mean, we value land, but the rest of the stuff, are we just greenwashing?
I don't know that term. What is greenwashing?
Greenwashing means you're saying you're green and being sustainable, but you're actually doing the complete opposite. But it's like, you know, it's a bit like Boris Johnson flew to the G7 conference saying he was going to concentrate on climate change. It's only 280 miles and there's a train.
I got it.
Well, in any case, well, we can't, you know, it's true, we can't speak for the whole town, but we can speak for ourselves, as Kate just did. So does it resonate with you?
I think we value it. I'm sort of with Debbie. I'm not convinced that you only have to go to the transfer station to see how much we consume.
Yeah, yeah, we have a big challenge. Okay, fair enough.
Sorry, the value statement does resonate with me as well, but I'm curious as to where the how we got to this point, and from whose input did these value statements get created?
Good question, and that's some of what Alexis and Barney went through a little bit in the introduction, but not specific to environmental stewardship. But really, this was brought out in surveys in the kitchen corners and some of the workshops that have already been done earlier on, most of it, a lot of it before the pandemic struck. And we've been capturing those ideas and keeping them. But this is where we come back to the community and say, did we get it right? Did we capture the sentiment? So this is an opportunity to have input, but this is not the only opportunity. There'll be a number of others, and that's the key. There actually will even be a broad survey that's going to go out shortly, and we're going to try to get a lot of participation in that survey to make sure that we're not just talking to the preaching to the converted who you know, arguably people who select this group might not be representative of the whole community. So that's a
Yeah,
good-
I was gonna say, I'm curious to see how many, with how many people these value statements do resonate. And yeah, are we so far in this process getting it right?
That's
yeah.
absolutely agree, Dan. And so our firm kind of came into this partway through the process and are, you know, very hopeful to see that when the survey goes out that hopefully that it is saying, yes, this all, you know, the previous work done represents what the community has said through the various community engagement events that I'm sure it feels like it was forever ago at this point.
Yeah.
But the other thing to keep in mind is that on the website, I know this would be a lot to sift through. I'm not suggesting that you would need to go through it all, but there are, you know, notes from the meetings available and the kitchen conversations as well. So you can kind of get a sense. I mean, not that you want to probably go through and tally everything, but you can take a look and kind of see. But the survey will hopefully give us real, concrete, you know, quantitative information about how the community feels about these. So that is a good point, and that's exactly why we're kind of, as Bob said, kind of test the waters before we go too much further with coming up with all these very specific recommendations if it's not actually in line with the community at large. So.
The survey you mentioned, is that its own thing, or is it going to be sort of the every 5-year community needs assessment? And if not, would you be also looking to that to inform decisions going forward?
That's an excellent question. I'll have to broach that with the committee about so you do a 5-year survey?
I think so. And I think this year is we're due.
Okay. I mean, I think that we would want to use every bit of input that is available. This is a separate survey really just to test kind of these goals. But absolutely, I mean, if that is something that the community already does, that will happen to be kind of during this process. So one of the first slides that we showed when we were talking about like what a master plan is, it's wants to connect with what the community's already doing. And it may recommend that the community do other planning efforts as well. But certainly if the community already does some sort of, you know, community-wide survey every X amount of years, the most recent one would be very helpful to look at.
Yeah, for sure.
So this piece about the community's impact on the natural environment, it sort of interests me as it being a Carlisle value. If you look around and you see, do we really value this? Or do we wish that we valued it? When you think about, you know, why is the Board of Health not requiring a ban on, you know, pesticides and things like that? I mean, we're all using well water. We've all got, you know, a lot of restrictions on, you know, septic services and septic systems. The regulations there for Carlisle far exceed the state regulations. We're extra careful with that, but not with just the groundwater in general and what's in it. And just about all of Carlisle, given 2-acre zoning, could be considered, quote, natural environment.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. But this is why we do a master plan, is sort of, there may be some things, again, we have to see how far the town wants to go. There does need to be some type of consensus, but if we find there's things we're not doing that we want to be doing, this is one way to help make those things happen. I just wanted to mention, you obviously noticed I scrolled down to put up all the goal statements because I want to make sure we get into some of the specifics of the goals as well as the value statement here in our limited time. I just encourage you, I'm not going to try to read all these, but read them through and just react. You can react to one at a time, or you can suggest some new goals. You can suggest some here that maybe aren't important enough to include, that maybe we should take off. but just love to get your reaction to whether this is the right list of goals to support this value statement.
I think, I mean, I like a carbon reduction goal. We need to reduce our carbon emissions, and that is kind of town-wide. I mean, I think,
Yes.
you know, and there's lots of things that some of the other groups are talking about that are actually set to increase our carbon emissions.
Oh, well, we'll have to look
Yeah.
into that.
So, I mean, you know, every new house that you build in Carlisle increases our carbon emissions.
And you have the embodied carbon of the material and energy you taken to produce the building, the materials that are in that building.
Let alone the running cost of that building.
Well, no, the embodied carbon is actually worse than the running cost.
Okay.
And that's why the only thing architects are talking about is embodied carbon now, because for the last 50 years we've been concentrating on energy use rather than the materials that are used to build buildings, and a lot of them are petrochemicals.
You bring up an interesting point, Philip. That do we think about carbon on a per capita basis, or do we think about it on a whole community basis? And that may be a discussion we still need to have.
That's a really good point, actually.
I mean, as we discussed in the previous one, the US population is only growing through immigration, and it's not growing very fast. And most of the other Western countries, their populations are either static or declining. I mean, the US population is not going to go on increasing for much longer,
But the problem is, Philip, everybody's moving to the coast because, so there's going to be nobody left in the middle. We still need housing in Massachusetts.
So but everybody says we need housing everywhere, because no community understands how to survive in a zero growth environment.
I'm not saying that we necessarily need, we could turn lots of these very large houses into several flats like we did in the UK after the war.
Yes.
There are other ways. We don't have to actually build more buildings. We can adapt buildings.
Well, but say if we do build more buildings, is it something that as a community we look at making them more sustainable?
The state's going to bring that in anyway.
So are we somebody that signs on early, Deb? Maybe
I think so. I think if we do, it's better.
Yeah, we tried to do the whole thing with solar, but I mean the reality is majority of the town is very wooded. So then a girlfriend of mine has got a huge piece of property, and she said the number of trees she would have to take down in order to be able to make it effective with her solar was just, it was ridiculous. So she opted not to do it. But I don't know, is that something we look at again as a situation? I mean, we are doing it over the school parking lot, which I think is great. And do we look at more environmentally, I don't know, advantageous places to do stuff like that?
And the good news is there are more ways to do solar than just on our rooftops.
Yeah.
Community solar, we can, they can be centralized solar plants that are quite remote from Carlisle, but we could use the electricity. So yeah, we value our trees, and there are some physical limitations in how much solar we can put right into Carlisle, no question.
And UMass use agriculture underneath the solar panels. That's what they're researching at the moment. And it's very successful.
The Cranberry Bog Solar Farm.
There it will.
Well, but even like geothermal, I mean, I think it was really great when we did participate with other towns to do solar. I mean, we put in a whole bunch of panels, 10 years ago, 8 years or something like that, because I think we did it with Westford or Chelmsford or something.
Chelmsford, yeah.
And, we do have a community that, unfortunately, you do have to be able to pay for it or have some ability, but, maybe we continue to look at those other sort of programs that could interest people.
I love this. These are great. these are action steps we can take to achieve these goals. So keep going. What else?
Yeah, this is great conversation. Can I ask a quick question just based on something that I was talking about housing and its relationship to environmental stewardship concerns? I have a colleague who happens to be doing a project with Mass Audubon on low impact development, and she happened upon a development in Carlisle that I was just unaware of, haven't gotten to in my research yet. But so Woodward Village, what's the story? What's the story on that? What's the community's reception of that? How's that going?
It's $1 million to buy the house.
It's what?
$1 million to buy a house.
So not even from an affordability standpoint, but just because it's capturing the low impact development and clustering. And so I was just curious if how
it was a lot of community effort went into this land transaction, and the argument was that we're going to allowing some cluster housing here and putting some type of energy efficiency requirements. We can argue whether they're the best or not, but there's something in there about energy efficiency requirements. The trade-off is the 2-acre zoning gets waived. They can make it more dense.
Right.
Most of the land has been turned over to the town.
Right. So, from a sustainability perspective, that kind of model is kind of considered a best practice, if you will, in terms of maintaining open space. And but so how is that being handled with the is there going to be like a community well, or how is that going to work with the septic and the wells? I haven't learned enough about the project yet to.
I believe it is a community septic and community wells. What do you guys does anybody else have that recollection?
I don't know whether there's more than one well, but certainly there's not a well for every house or every unit. There's 1 or 2 wells and 1 or 2 septic systems, I think.
Okay.
But perhaps we should be changing the building code or something. I mean, there's no restriction as far as I know that says all new development must have composting toilets, for example. Now that would be a very, very positive thing in terms of the type of housing going forward. And that's a difficult thing to do to an existing structure.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a very, very easy thing to do if you're building a new house.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a lot of things in building code that we don't restrict, we don't care about. Mm-hmm. So the new properties, when it's easy to implement a lot of good features that would support these goals, we don't do.
Mm.
And
but there are ways to do it, though. I mean, one of the things the community has the power to do is to say, just like with the Woodward development, if we allow you, if we waive for you the 2-acre zoning requirement, we then can impose other requirements.
Mm-hmm.
If we wanted to include composting toilets, or if we wanted to include net zero energy, whatever we wanted to do, you can make that trade-off, and you're basically saying, well, you don't have to do net zero, but if you want to put a house in every 1 acre, or you want to put 4 houses on 1 acre, this is a requirement. So that's a common way of doing it, and Woodward's an example of that. Exactly.
And Bob and I, in our discussions, Bob has made the very good point that, talking about new residential is one, yes, that is a thing that should be explored, but considering the existing housing stock and the ways in which, Bob, you gave a very good statistic for me that is eluding me now, but basically just that, 20 years from now, it's mostly still going to be the same housing stock. And so if we're really concerned with reducing carbon footprint, it's not just about new residential, it's about existing and what can we do, to Kay's point about it's much easier to do these things in something that hasn't been built yet, but what can we do for the homes that are already here? So I
Right.
don't have an answer for that at this point, but Bob, that was a really good point that he made. Because we as planners often focus so much on, the future, the potential, and well, okay, but these buildings are all still going to be here and they're responsible for a lot of the community's carbon emissions. So I thought that was a good point.
So one of the things that I think that does have to happen, and I think we have to do a better job at the transfer station, educating people, really getting folks on board to really look at where they put stuff. Because I mean, even the signs that say no plastic bags, you see plastic bags in the plastic stuff. And, I could very much be talking to the choir here. So, but I think it is something that we just have to constantly keep on doing. And I don't know if it's even something that, say, the realtors, when the people move into town or something, that there's a sheet that says, again, this is what we do or don't do.
Right.
And periodically people monitoring it there.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And more broadly, even what can we do to reduce our waste?
Yeah.
We're not even throwing as much out. What can we do to reuse or not use in the first place?
Mm-hmm.
Any thoughts on that?
The swap shed is pretty active.
Sorry?
The swap shed is pretty active. I mean, there is a serious amount of reuse goes on.
That's
around.
true. That's true.
I mean, really, really and truly.
Try the Facebook page of Buy Nothing Concord Carlisle. You can't believe how fast and how much people exchange. They just give away, which is great. It's great. It's not going into the landfill.
I think incentives, sort of as our new mattress policy, I think is a great one.
We're closing out in
no.
Because I know I'm involved with household goods and I see things up there all the time that I will take if I can fit it in my car. But if I can't, there's organizations around that people can use, and maybe just educating more.
What is the mattress incentive?
They were starting with UTEC, which is in Lowell, that the mattresses will go to Lowell, to UTEC, and they take them apart and do a variety of things with them, recycle them.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Well, we got 24 seconds. Any parting thoughts before we get swept into the main room?
Thanks, Bob. This was really a good discussion.
Thank you, everybody. Okay, well, all to take here.
Thanks for your work, Bob, and everyone.
Thank you, Dan.
Likewise.
Oh, Jan, I'm sorry.
It's okay. This time I was trying to line it up exactly. And it didn't quite finish.
So I think we are pretty much all coming back here, right? Yes, awesome. So thank you everybody for hanging on and participating in these discussions. I'm going to go ahead and screen share really briefly just for some closing remarks. And I am also going to, again, put the link for the master plan page in the chat. And that has some just really great resources on it that I would encourage you to review. In fact, that's actually the first thing I'm going to pull up, just so in case people need to hop off. It's such a great resource. Just another example of how dedicated your town is to this process. It's not something we see all the time, and it's so great. So if you scroll through, and if you're interested in joining on Sunday, when we say rebroadcast, essentially the first part of the presentation, we're just going to play a recording, a rebroadcast, and then the breakout groups will go live. Depending on attendance, if it's a small group, we may just conduct it all in one discussion, kind of looking to see how many people show up. But if you feel you didn't get to discuss something and you want to, that link is there. The document that lists all of the draft vision, values, and goals is up there as well. And when the survey, we want to give the community some time to think about this, reflect, ask committee members questions, you know who the members of the committee are. And then when that survey goes live, we will share it with you and make sure you are aware of it. The other thing that I think is so very important, if you haven't done so yet, is to, I know there's a place on here because I saw it before, to sign up for, if you haven't signed up for an email, to do so. And of course I can't find that now, but I know I saw it. So you're able to do that as well. And Mary Lynn, if I'm going crazy and wrong about that, certainly please. Oh, yep, right here. So under Mapping Carlisle's Future, there's a stay informed by joining our mailing list. So if you're not on that, I absolutely recommend that you do, so that you can be the first to know when the survey is live, and any other community engagement that we do over the course of the summer, which would be kind of on smaller scales, similar, to kitchen conversations or something like that, to give people time to kind of digest and think about moving into the next step, which is recommendations. So that's the first thing I wanted to share because I know people have to hop off. We aren't going to do a takeaway summary from each group because I know with 5 groups at 3 times, I mean, that would just be a lot. But what we will do, we will process the notes and recordings and figure out how best to manage that and get you all of the information needed. I'm just going to
And tell your friends and tell your friends about Sunday. We want to see you. The breakout groups were very good sessions.
Oh my gosh, they were so good. It was so great. I was so glad to hear the conversations I heard and really good points that people were making about, I think, starting to think about trade-offs and things like that. So again, just next steps, rebroadcast of this on Sunday. And then with the anticipated survey launch, we're working with our friends producing the survey. Our anticipated launch is around June 21st, but we'll make sure that once that's in place. And we're also working on kind of a virtual comment box as well, to kind of weigh in more about these as you have more time to reflect on them after tonight. But I strongly encourage you to visit that site and download the draft vision, values, and goals so you can kind of think about them and process them. But that is all that that we have tonight. And Jack, if you wanted to.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say a thank you to everyone that's still on. I really appreciate it. Thank you to all of our committee members for hosting the breakout groups. The ones that I attended were very helpful, as John indicated. I also want to say thanks, Alexis, to you and to David for doing a great job of running things behind the scenes. David Jang is our intern this summer, and we're really grateful to have him. And thank you for doing great work behind the scenes.
Really,
so,
very much.
Appreciate it, and was great. And I look forward to hopefully in the fall we can get out in person with our next community forum when we do one.
Yes. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.
Good night.
Okay. Good night. Thank you.
Good night.